solar power boost on that Charizard, get rid of the chlorophyll speed boost on that Venusaur most likely is going to be key. And just sort of being forced to play that Kyogre in a defensive manner means that you're probably also going to be forced to send in that Landorus and, quite frankly, possibly the Tornadus as well as a lead to just get that speed control on the field, get that Intimidate down, threaten with a Rock Slide or a Max Rockfall, and just sort of start chipping away.
Yeah, well, it's time to head into the game. All of these questions that we have soon to be answered. And just starting things off, it is going to be that dog. It is going to be that Zacian with this Tornadus going up with that Calyrex Shadow Rider and the double restricted pairing.
It's a very, very scary restricted pairing to see, as well as this Groudon is free to go for a Dynamax this turn, deal some really big damage. You know, Max Quake is a bit more accurate than the Precipice Blades, which is always something to keep in mind. And I think really the most important thing here to note is that there's nothing necessarily punishing a turn one Dynamax on Santino's side of the field. Yes, Michael could go for a Behemoth Blade. That is going to do a lot of damage, but it's not going to do enough for a one-hit knockout, especially after the Intimidate from this Incineroar as well.
Yeah, I like the swap here. Instead of going straight onto the offense with the Groudon, instead bringing the Incineroar in and bringing that Intimidate with it, make sure the Zacian can't quite go too unchecked, and it's going to actually be a pretty passive turn. The Calyrex also going for that Protect, but being able to take advantage of that, the Tailwind coming out in the Tornadus, that'll make sure that Michael can go speedy quick with this Zacian.
And that's the most important thing when you're facing down a Shadow Rider Calyrex, one of the fastest Pokemon in the format right now. You have to get that speed advantage, and you have to attack it at least twice. A lot of them run Focus Sash for this exact kind of situation. Now that Santino has a Fake Out user on the field, he could at least go for the flinch into the Zacian this turn. You know, maybe force Michael to sort of find a slower turn through this first turn of Tailwind for him. Maybe even force a switch here as well, just if you don't want this Zacian to take damage from the attacks from this Shadow Rider Calyrex. You know, sometimes they actually do bring ground type moves, which is something you have to keep in mind here, as that would deal some really big damage. But a bit of an unexpected Dynamax here.
Yeah, I think unexpected is a really good way to put it. Looking to, you know, you got the speed on your side, now looking to be putting on that pressure. Dynamax is going to be coming out to play. I like the aggressiveness. I like maxing something that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Obviously, you had the Tailwind, but there's going to be some moves as well. And a way to put some pressure back on the field of course, the Zacian not going to be doing much as that Fake Out hits into it. A Max Airstream is going to be the move of choice, dealing a nice, healthy amount of damage into this Calyrex Shadow Rider. And of course, what's better than a little bit more speed on your side? Now an Ostrobot coming out. We're talking about healthy damage. That's going to be a lot to both of the Pokemon, and a little damage taken from the Calyrex is going to be life orb.
Yeah, so that's really great information. No Focus Sash means that in future turns, Michael can just go for the double into that Pokemon, knock it out. But I think the most important thing here is that Dynamax could be an indication that this Tornadus didn't want to roll for Hurricane accuracy. You know, sometimes they don't run Hurricane, but on a team with Kyogre support especially, you bring the Rain, you get that 100% accuracy on Hurricane, and you just run the stronger flying type move. Dynamax is another way to guarantee that accuracy, and as you can see, it did plenty of damage to that Calyrex to make it worthwhile. It really frees up the Zacian on Michael's side of the field to target down that Incineroar with maybe a Sacred Sword or a Close Combat, its fighting move of choice, as most of them are still running those moves.
And for good reason. That super effective hit's going to be bringing that down real low. And it's not going to stop there. It is going to be a Max Hailstorm coming out just to clean off the KO on this Calyrex Shadow Rider here. And of course, bringing the hail, I mean, considering the restricteds we see, it's not necessarily the weather mode that I thought we were going to see to start things off. But, you know, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. A parting shot from the Incineroar, just going to be making sure that, you know, tame this is just a little bit, but also chance to reposition.
It's possible that Michael was hoping to catch that Groudon on the switch-in with that Max Hailstorm, because otherwise I feel like you don't reveal that information to your opponent. There are only like one ice move that people would expect to see on a Tornadus, and that's just good confirmation for Santino that, hey, this Tornadus probably also running Icy Wind, probably has access to another form of speed control other than the Tailwind and the Max Airstream we've seen from it already. So again, good information. Unfortunately, unfortunate that it was revealed a little bit early, but did still get the knockout on the Calyrex Shadow Rider, and certainly does threaten big damage down onto the Groudon now that it's back out on the field. But I think the most important thing to note here, though, is that Michael is one knockout away, a very easy knockout with that Incineroar at such low health, from locking Santino into his last 2 Pokemon, which means assuming Michael does have the Kyogre in the back, then you just switch it in, you set up the rain, and then that Groudon is just having a bit of a rough day. So as a result, I think if Santino has to keep that in mind when trying to plan out his win condition for this match. As tempting as it may be to go for Dynamax this turn, maybe you just wait a turn. You make sure that your Groudon is going to be at full health, and then if you have access to Max Flare, you can use that as a way to control the weather. But again, more information. It looks like Michael also brought this Landorus, which is going to make this matchup so much tougher for Santino.
Definitely is. Not going to be the only one going for a switch, though. Incineroar, who had just freshly come in, going to be going back out, revealing the Snarl. Then the back end, sure enough, it is going to be the Dynamax this turn, trying to make a little bit of ground, but considering the fact that the Landorus did come in, did get that Intimidate, this Groudon's going to be Dynamaxing already with a little bit of a hit to its attack, and that hurts.
It does hurt, but will give it the opportunity to get some defense boosts. Special defense might be interesting, but it's also going to struggle to connect that attack with 2 flying Pokemon on the field.
That is for sure. Yet again, this run, as we knew, that is so speedy. It's going to just keep putting on this pressure. Another max airstream, just chipping away at the damage. It's going to be a max flare, something that, you know, is going to connect despite the flying type. And it is going to be dealing a good amount of damage. The Tailwind is going to expire this turn, but already the speed boosts that have accumulated on that side, it's at least good until anything gets KO'd or switches out.
I do want to take a moment to talk about the late game Grimmsnarl from Santino, as that's something you don't normally see trainers do. Grimmsnarl, I think, has gotten a reputation as a Pokemon you send out first. It's holding Light Clay. It sets up a screen of its choice, possibly 2. Sets up Thunder Wave, some form of speed control, and then gets knocked out, at which point you have enough of an advantage to sort of just power through the rest of the match. By saving the Grimmsnarl for the end, I think Santino has opened up an interesting opportunity for himself to sort of find a way back in. You know, Groudon was able to get through its first turn of Dynamax without taking any damage, and as a result, Grimmsnarl can give it the more defenses and just sort of help it find opportunities to get more attacks in, which is going to be super important, as it really is the only Pokemon left on his team that can deal big damage.
Yeah, it's going to be that light screen that comes up from the Grimmsnarl, and Icy Wind in response, I mean, a little bit of chip, a little bit of speed drops on the other side. Landorus going for that Earthquake, of course. It's not going to attack his partner Pokemon, but instead going to be getting this KO on to the Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl, we were talking about in the early game how it doesn't really stick around for long. That's not going to change much in this late game either. Going to be a big move in return, though, and that's going to be finally Santino taking the first KO from his own side.
Yeah, that Rockfall is a nice way to pick up damage onto the Tornadus, but unfortunately for Santino, down to his last 2 Pokemon, and Michael given the opportunity to send in that Kyogre right now, if it indeed is his last Pokemon. I like sending in the Zacian first. You know, maybe you just find your way through that last turn of Dynamax. You do have a Protect. You can take, you know, a quarter of the damage you would otherwise from those max moves. You also get the opportunity to possibly switch out and drop the Intimidate from this Incineroar, but you know, I think that Santino has taken enough damage on the Incineroar that it doesn't necessarily matter if the Zacian's intimidated. You know, we saw the Sacred Sword already do a ton of damage. It's going to pick up the knockout from this range at this point in time. So really your number 1 priority is stall out the remainder of Dynamax and then just find a way to get the Kyogre on the field against the Groudon, and hopefully you have an accurate water move to pick up that knockout.
That's always the key, isn't it? We're going to see the Protect coming out from the Zacian, the Fake Out into that slot, of course, not really going to be doing too much at that point. Revealed, though, is going to be the Sugar Berry, and it's going to allow this Incineroar to be holding on, though I don't know after this chip if it's going to quite round on. Last turn of Max will be going for that Max Quake into the Zacian slot. Not enough to be picking up that KO either through this Protect.
Which is awesome for Michael, as now Dynamax is over, Zacian is faster, Zacian can attack the Groudon through these special defense boosts, as it is going to be hitting on the physical side of damage, and really all Michael has to do is wait a single turn, and then that Incineroar will be knocked out as well. So especially noting how these Pokemon are trained on Michael's side of the field, if he wanted to make a really big play here, he could go for a Behemoth Blade plus another Earthquake, knock out his own Zacian, but then sort of clear the field for that last Pokemon to come in. But it is an interesting option for Michael to try and win this without getting another Pokemon knocked out, because that leaves that last Pokemon as a mystery. Yes, it's likely it is that Kyogre, but if it were something like the Kartana or something, that would be incredible information for Santino to know, especially given that his last two Pokemon here are Fire-type Pokemon. So just, you know, playing the information game here. I think the early forfeit from Santino, most likely an indication that he wants to keep some information of his own secret for Game 2, which is going to be key to remember, as there are going to be several adaptations I think he has to make in terms of his approach to this next game.
Yeah, I mean, specifically too, just in the fact how people just playing that speed more so. First, you start off with speeding up with this tailwind, you put out this pressure, that max drain, I mean, was expected, but I liked seeing the max airstreams just getting that damage done. But then the Icy Wind after, just that additional speed control. I know we didn't see the Kyogre, we can only guess that it was there, but I do like the fact that we didn't, because if it did come down to that last and final Pokemon, already the Pokemon you've gotten through the Incineroar fake out, the Pokemon, the Groundhound's already had a speed drop, and would just allow it to just take over the rest of the game, which I really appreciate. I feel like it was really well set up for a specific end game, if that was the spot.
Yeah, and the thing that I find very interesting, I mean, you're absolutely right that the Tailwind and the Icy Wind and the various other winds that we saw were key.
The storm out there.
Yeah, the storm out there that were key to how this game played out. You know, Michael has many forms of speed control on his team, where Santino, you know, seemingly doesn't have any. Yes, you can use Fake Out to sort of flinch and get speed control that way. Certainly you have Chlorophyll Venusaur available to you if you want to make that Pokemon adjustment. But I think finding a way to counteract the Tailwind and the Airstreams we saw early on from Michael is going to be key for Santino in adaptations going into this game too. You know, I think that Michael played that game one very smart, in the sense that he didn't let it come down to the Kyogre. You know, he knew that the speed boost plus the Zacian was going to be enough to apply that initial pressure. And then by the time that the Incineroar was forced out on the field, by the time we saw, you know, Santino adjust and go for those Intimidates to try and slow things down once again, there was already just so much momentum in his favor that it didn't really matter. You know, Sacred Sword was going to get that knockout regardless of if it was -2 or -3.
Yeah, and that Grimmsnarl that we saw too, I mean, we talked about the fact that seeing it later could maybe preserve the ground, considering it was max, but I feel like it really didn't do much. It got it light screened and then it got KO'd. So interesting to see if there could be an adjustment from that end. And already we get to see one, as it's going to be the Venusaur to start things off. We were talking about the lack of speed control. Venusaur, the one way of actually having some sort of speed control just for itself. And I like that, putting some pressure back on.
Yeah, and I also really like, and this is just going to be a moment of self-pandering here, you know, Santino in the Players' Cup Invitational had all these Pokemon with really cool marks and ribbons, and I'm loving that we're seeing this again. I mean, Incineroar, the Strutter, Venusaur, the Tried and True, like, these are Pokemon that have clearly journeyed a far way with Santino, and already just making the swap in and giving this Venusaur the opportunity to be very quick with the sun still on the field. I mean, maybe you just go for the sleep powder right now and hope for the best.
I feel like that's the Venusaur way. You go for the sleep powders, hope that it's going to be enough.
The tried and true.
Yeah, you do have to be taking a hefty hit throw from this Zacian. It is going to survive, and it is going to get the chance to fire off a sleep powder in return. That is going to be targeting into this spot and put it right to rest.
So it doesn't stop the Tailwind, but does give Santino the opportunity to stop any further speed control, at least until the Tornadus wakes up. It's guaranteed to be asleep for this next turn, which means you can pretty safely target the Zacian with your Fake Out and then go for an attack. Probably a Sludge Bomb would be the attack of choice from this Venusaur into that Tornadus. And as Tornadus is not known to be a bulky Pokemon, it probably will get knocked out in a couple of hits. So already Santino opening up the door for his later Pokemon to not have to worry about speed control. That being said, though, there still are a couple of turns of Tailwind now that he has to contend with, and next turn really has to be careful to try and, you know, prioritize these knockouts accordingly.
Yeah, being able to bring in the Incineroar, at least you had the Fake Out pressure for this turn, make sure that your Venusaur is not going to get KO'd from this Zacian, does get that Sludge Bomb that you were talking about to start dealing some damage, but now that that Fake Out pressure is gone, you know that the Zacian's now going to be speedy. It's kind of a weird spot.
It is a weird spot, and it's a tough call for both these trainers. On the one hand, Santino could just go for a second Sleep Powder into that Zacian and say, you know what, if you don't knock me out, I'm going to take that role, and if I put your Zacian to sleep, that's going to be absolutely huge for me. On the other hand, you know, if Michael decides to go for that knockout, you have to worry about this Incineroar. A Flare Blitz with the Sun Boost is certainly going to do enough damage to knock out this Zacian. It's possible that the Intimidate from this Landorus will be enough to keep Zacian safe, but it's a tough call to make for sure.
It does at least keep the Tornado safer at this point, considering the swap out is going to take a Sludge Bomb a lot better. Zacian is going to be fire off, no protect, going to just try and see what happens and going to claim the KO on the Venusaur while having the opportunity. So only one Sleep Powder is all the Venusaur is going to get. Instead of a Flare Blitz though, instead looking to deal some sort of hindrance to the Zacian another way. It's going to be a parting shot, lower this attack, and a chance, again, to double position.
And that, I think, covers the Kyogre switch in. You know, again, we don't know what this last Pokemon is for Michael. I'm just making the assumption that it is the Kyogre because that's how you play this team. But by going for parting shot there over Flare Blitz, you just recognize, okay, if the Kyogre comes in, at least I'm not losing the Incineroar immediately. Gives me the opportunity to send out the Groudon again to change the weather up, or alternatively get another Intimidate down on the field.
Yeah.
Given that the Zacian is now at -2 and that this opposing Landorus is at -1, you know, even though Michael still has the Tailwind up in his favor, those Pokemon aren't going to be dealing as much damage, and Zacian getting very close to the point where I think Michael just has to switch it out, send that Tornadus in to take a couple of attacks, maybe wake up, and then come back in once you get your Intrepid Sword back and there's no Intimidator on the field.
Yeah, the fact, too, that Santino's made it so, you know, last game, Michael went for a Dynamax right away, was able to apply the pressure, but just managing to get that Sleep Powder off, just managing to be dealing a little bit of damage and get these Intimidate swaps. It seems like now Michael's in a weird kind of pinch. Is still going to be going for that Dynamax with this Landorus, but now that is Dynamaxing with negative attack.
Yeah, but maybe you just go for the support option here. I mean, Landorus is another Pokemon that gets access to Max Airstream. Yeah. And if you're not worried about the attack drops on your Zacian because you have Sacred Sword, because you're going to be hitting that Incineroar for super effective, it's not as big of a deal. Alternatively, you go for Max Quake. That's another way to boost up your defenses, especially against Shadow Calyrex Rider, which is a special attacker. You know, that does give you more time. And I think that's exactly what Michael needs to keep finding here, is time to keep this pressure just up.
Oh, Max Quake this time, instead looking to just make sure after this Tailwind ends that there's still going to be speed on Michael's side, opting for that Max Airstream instead. Sure, maybe these Pokemon don't have the best attack at this point, but you might have the speed, but you're going to get burnt for that play. And considering that these are physical attackers, that hurts.
Burning Jealousy, one of the major adjustments we saw come out of the Indianapolis Regional Championships. I feel like a ton of Incineroar decided that weekend to run it, and this is exactly why. When you have these Dynamax users on the field that are going for Max Quake or Max Steel Spikes or Max Airstreams, you can just immediately punish that with a burn, having the amount of damage they do moving forwards. Quite frankly, at this point, if I were Michael and that were my Zacian, I don't even think you try to switch it out anymore. You just say, I'm going to do damage. It's going to be whatever it's going to be.
What do you switch it to, this Sleeping Tornadus?
Exactly. Like, there's just no benefit, I think, in getting it off the field and dropping those Intimidates, knowing that your attack is already going to be halved. It's much better to just go for the chip damage onto the Calyrex, onto the Incineroar. You know, maybe try and guarantee the knockout on one of them after a couple of turns so that you're clearing the way for Kyogre later.
Well, Incineroar is going to be leaving, and that's going to clear the way for Groudon to re-enter the field here. And I mean, very safe to do so considering the board state of Michael's own Ed. Behemoth Blade hitting into this Calyrex Shadow. Just look how little damage that does. Zacian is known for being an absolute beast of restricted, and seeing just how little it is doing as well as how little this Lander is doing, it's almost comical at this point. And Santino has put himself in a really nice spot.
Yeah, it's a very tough position for Michael to be in, because while you want to switch your Pokemon out so that you can deal damage, On the other hand, if you switch your Pokemon out and they come into a, an Astral Barrage from this Calyrex Shadow Rider, that's going to be so much damage on the field. You're really just better off letting the Pokemon get knocked out and get your free switches in. Given, though, the fact that the Calyrex Shadow Rider has gotten 1 special attack boost and most likely will get a second from knocking out this Landorus in the next turn, I think that it's great that we finally do see the confirmation that Michael's Kyogre is the last Pokemon of choice, but it might just be too little too late. If this Kyogre is relying on something like Water Spout to deal damage, it's going to be taking so much damage prior to that attack, it's not going to be that effective. If it's relying on something like an Origin Pulse or maybe a Scald or something else, then Michael certainly has a way out here. It's just he's going to have to take 2 attacks for every single one that he's able to fire out. And Santino just making a great call here as well. Not only getting another attack drop down on this Landorus, but also giving Groudon the opportunity to get the Sun back in later, which is really cementing his position on the board at this point.
Oh, definitely. The Calyrex 2 just going to go for the Protect, so sure, Michael will get the opportunity to attack going into this turn. It will be the max Airstream. It's barely any damage, but what is going to be important about this is just the fact that it will speed up this Kyogre. It is just now facing down an Incineroar that has the ability to fake it out next turn. And reminder, there still hasn't been a Dynamax from Santino's side of the board here, so that hurts. The Origin Pulse is going to connect, though, at this point. Of course, not doing anything into the Calyrex, but connecting into the Incineroar at least doesn't have to worry about that fake out pressure. So that is something at least going right for him, because we all know how those moves can be sometimes.
I know, seriously. And Santino is also down to his last 2 Pokemon, which I think does give Michael another opportunity for an out here, because Groudon will be forced out onto the field, will be forced to set up Drought, and Kyogre could easily switch out. That Sleeping Tornadus can come back in, and then that's how Michael keeps that weather up. Granted, Santino could go for the Dynamax on that Groudon to use Max Flare to get that weather control back, but quite honestly, he might not even need it at this point. Like, I think you definitely go for that Dynamax on Groudon. It seems to be pretty bulky from what we've seen, but obviously twice your health is better than half the number that would be where you're at right now. And just being able to secure, like, okay, Groudon, it will be able to take at least 1 Origin Pulse, even if the rain does come back up, I think would really just lock in Santino's win condition here. So also another opportunity for this Calyrex Shadow Rider to pick up Grimnay boosts here, which could just further increase the lead for Santino.
Especially, too, we saw in game 1 how much Michael was with that speed, whether it was the Icy Wind, the Tailwind, the max Airstreams. But the swap from the Kyogre now no longer has that speed boost. As is still asleep at this point, and with the Calyrex Shadow Rider going to be the one actually in this Dynamax. You were talking about those Grimnay boosts and how dangerous and those could be well stacked up. It's even more dangerous now in this Dynamax form. The Phantasm coming out. That is going to be confirming the KO here on the Tornado, so no worries about a wake up, getting speed control back, just eliminating it from the field altogether.
Yeah, I think +2 max Phantasm onto the Kyogre, barring something like a Assault Vest, will probably guarantee the knockout, quite frankly. And, Heat Crash onto this Landorus as well. It was already at such low health.
Yeah.
I saw Michael go for a Rock Slide that turn, which, had the Calyrex not been the Dynamax choice for Santino, could have made a difference, could have gotten a flinch. We've certainly seen it happen here in Pokemon. But, Santino just, again, keeping that win condition in mind, making sure that the Calyrex Shadow Rider, as quite frankly the most important Pokemon on the field for him, was able to attack that turn, was able to get the knockouts he needed, and as a result, I really want to see if this is going to be a one-hit knockout on this Kyogre. I think if I were Michael, I would have forfeited, but we're going to see it. Let's see how much this does.
I mean, considering the boost and everything, I don't know if you got a chance to see the mark either on this Kyogre, the 100 times victorious.
Yes.
Such a cool title, but unfortunately going to be taking the L this time around. But that does mean we get a game 3, and the adjustments that we saw from Santino to make it to that point, I adore it.
It was incredibly well played by both these trainers. I think that the key differences from game 1 and game 2 was the fact that Santino connected the Sleep Powder on that Tornadus, and as a result, Michael was forced to slow things down a bit more. You know, he wasn't able to get as much speed control as he was on the field. As a result, he wasn't able to threaten the Calyrex Shadow Rider as much as he could have previously. And as a result, Santino just finding the opportunity, went for those attacks, got the damage, and was able to win that quite comfortably. I mean, it did come down to his last 2 Pokemon at the end, but for a while it looked like he was going to find the 4-0, which was pretty exciting to see play out.
Yeah, I would still say it was comfortably too. Sure, you're down to your last 2 Pokemon, but considering the state that you were in, like, yeah, sure, you got down to your last 2 a little sooner, but the health on them, just the position that you still had your Dynamax until way late into it, it was just such a different showing from that first game, thanks to that sleep powder. And now that Michael knows that, okay, this is a really big hindrance going into this game, like, I really like that speed control. I really like what it offers. I'm intrigued to see what he's going to be doing in this 3rd game.
Yeah, sometimes when you're playing a team that really struggles against a sleep powder Venusaur in particular, you'll try and fit some safety goggles in on an item or on a Pokemon as their held item. I don't think we're going to see that here. You could consider bringing the Kartana as an adjustment, or the Amoonguss. You know, they're both grass-type Pokemon. They can't be put to sleep as a result. But it felt like, to me, Michael was just really comfortable with the the Tornadus and Landorus combination. I keep wanting to say the 3rd one, which just isn't here for some reason.
It's like a 2 out of 3.
Yeah,
just not having the odds on your side today.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. But, you know, he was very comfortable with those Pokemon in the past 2 games, and I think most likely we're going to see him go for a playstyle adjustment rather than a Pokemon adjustment. And really, Santino as well, leaving that Grimmsnarl behind for the Venusaur just made all the difference in that matchup, and I would be very surprised if we saw him make any changes beyond that, because, again, it was just very comfortable for him. He had his Dynamax until, like, the very last turn, it felt like, and that just gives you so much freedom when it comes to how you play out the game.
Yeah, seeing the Venusaur over the Grimmsnarl was a big adjustment that I was a really big fan of. To start things off, though, there's not going to be adjustments from either player. We're going to be seeing the same pairings that we saw in this game, too, to open things up. Of course, for Michael, we will have to see a little bit of a play adjustment to not be going down the same road we saw last time. But for Santino, I do like this opening.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Michael, this is the turn you tailwind. Unfortunately, you just have to go for it. I mean, you could try and, like, maybe protect that Tornadus if you have Protect on it, but then you just have to worry about the Sleep Powder again next turn, as we did get confirmation that Behemoth Blade is a 2-hit knockout on that Venusaur. It's most likely trained for it to be that way, and just leaving the Zacian out on the field as well against the Groudon is something dangerous. So Santino just finding, I think, the perfect lead for this matchup in particular based off how Michael's playing it. Michael could just make a Pokemon adjustment here, which would have given him an opportunity to outspeed that Venusaur in a different way, but it looks like we're just seeing the same thing as game 2 play out, which means will Sleep Powder connect?
I mean, that's what it comes down to at this point, since we know that Venusaur...
Okay, or you get a critical hit and then reveal the Focus Sash. I mean, that's
not even a critical hit. Yeah, so
right.
the training, it only goes so far, but Focus Sash is still great information. The Sleep Powder, though, is going to connect. Precipice Blades at this point will connect onto the Zacian at this point, dealing a massive amount of damage back. I can't even believe that was a critical hit. That was just a low for the first time around.
Yeah, I think what happened was in game 2, Santino switched out the Groudon for the Incineroar to get the Intimidate, and that just helped that Venusaur make that Behemoth Blade a lot more comfy. But if you have Focus Sash, I mean, that's another way to turn a 1-hit knockout into a 2-hit knockout. You don't necessarily need to switch in your Incineroar and put it in harm's way at this point in time. And I really like that play adjustment from Santino. I think that the Groudon here applies so much pressure on its own. You know, we saw Heat Crash do a ton of damage in the previous game. Precipice Blades as well, putting that Zacian into knockout range. And really all Santino needs to do now is connect an attack on that Zacian for the knockout. So great spot for him to be in at the start of this game. Michael really forced on the back foot, and I think really forced to send in this Kyogre a bit earlier this time as a result.
Yeah, what was interesting about this last time was the fact, because the Incineroar was the swap in, there was then that fake out pressure, but instead not having that, the Venusaur would have surely been KO'd if the Zacian went to target into it. So it's going to be a swap out coming out from Santino as well to bring this Incineroar out. This is going to be bringing the Intimidate down onto that Zacian, though it's already we're looking pretty hurt, but his Sacred Sword, fantastic. I mean, that Venusaur only had 1 HP. You don't need to be worrying how much you're doing at all, but a great cover for that Incineroar swap in. And at this point, too, that Kyogre took almost no damage from that E-Crash.
Yeah, an interesting move switch up there from Santino. I think he was pretty safe to go for a second Precipice Blades other than accuracy. But, you know, ignoring the Zacian entirely, maybe expecting a Protect and that Tornadus to just sit on the field for its guaranteed turn of sleep, just burn that earlier this game. And I think Michael just doing a great job of capitalizing on that, finding a way to get the Kyogre out on the field. Kyogre should still have the speed advantage. I believe there's at least one more turn of Tailwind available to it. And we already saw Origin Pulse. If Kyogre can find that this turn, that would be big. It might not even have to. I mean, if Santino goes for a fake out into that Kyogre, then you still have the Zacian on the field to deal some good damage as well. So Santino, I think, forced to send in this Venusaur probably for its last turn of this set. But Michael, another Pokemon adjustment here, a Dynamax adjustment, and I think this Kyogre is going to do a fantastic job of taking advantage of these 3 turns of Dynamax.
I mean, this is definitely a way to make sure that you don't get faked out by this
Exactly.
Incineroar, right? You just hit that Dynamax button and make sure that you can do as much damage as possible here. Fake out into that slot. It's only going to be good for a little bit of chip this time around. And of course, the Tailwind boots. Zacian's already so fast, it's going to continue to be so. Only had to do the 1, but it will confirm the KO at least onto this Venusaur. And we know where it's about to be headed with this Incineroar. I could really only see this going one way.
Yeah, I don't think there's a reason why you click anything but Max Geyser this turn. You know, that's easily going to pick up the knockout there and gives Michael the opportunity to reset the weather once this Groudon comes back out for Santino, which brings up an interesting question here. You know, in Game 2, we saw Santino get down to his last 2 Pokemon, the Calyrex Shadow Rider, confirmed to be back here for Game 3, and the Groudon. We saw the Calyrex Shadow Rider go for that Dynamax and those Max Phantasms and just sort of use that as a way to clean things up. Michael has the Dynamax already up on the field for this Kyogre, which is something different. And I wonder, you know, I think it comes down to Santino making a call here. Like, do I prioritize the weather control or do I prioritize the Calyrex Shadow Rider, as it would be the more offensive Pokemon out of the 2 of them? I think if I were in Santino's shoes, I would probably go for the Dynamax on Groudon, not only because it allows you to keep the weather around a bit longer, but you can also go for Max Quake to boost your special defense, which is going to help you survive these next couple of turns of Dynamax from this Kyogre as well. And if you can just find your way through those turns, I think Shadow Calyrex will be able to, you know, easily pick up the knockout on that Zacian for a special attack boost. By that point, most likely find enough damage down on the Kyogre for that knockout as well. And if it is just that Landorus Therian and the Tornadus again in the back of Michael's party, you know, again, I think Calyrex Shadow Rider, provided it can stay on the field long enough, is more than capable of knocking them out too.
I mean, it does have Protect as well, I believe, so it can just sit there, get the boost. It is going to be confirmed the Groudon that will be going for the Dynamax, so probably a similar path that you have been talking about here. Being able to still have that, yes, Santino's only down to 2 Pokemon at this point, but depending on how this pressure can go out, is going to be absolutely massive. It is going to be the Protect to make sure that this Calyrex is going to be sticking around, and that's a great call considering the Zacian is going to try and hit a Behemoth Blade into that slot. Of course, the Max Geyser, that is going to hit through, though not for much damage, but more importantly, the Weather Override. So now it's at the point at which it is it going to be the Max Quake boost? Is it going to be that weather prioritization? And it will be the Max Quake. I really like that, because I don't think you have to worry about the weather until the last turn if you really want to go that way.
Exactly. I mean, yes, you do want the sun to be up on the field. I mean, a critical hit on Max Quake is pretty great as well.
Right.
But as long as Michael has Dynamax available to him, and as long as this Kyogre is just naturally faster than the Groudon, you know, he'll be able to keep the weather control up pretty comfortably. So yes, you will be taking more damage this turn from a Max Geyser as the rain boost is active, but you're also increasing your defenses via the special defense boost. So you wait until Kyogre's Dynamax is over, and then you go for the Max Flare, and then you hope for the best. Now, what I find really interesting about this position is that both these Pokemon are at such low health. It's possible that this Calyrex Shadow Rider will be able to outspeed. Tailwind is now over. There is no more speed control on the field unless Zacian's hiding a Airstream that it carried over from an earlier game somewhere, which is not possible. It'll be able to pick up those knockouts with an Astral Barrage, and Calyrex will get a boost, which means it'll come down to just this Tornadus and this Landorus for Michael. You know, yes, forced to protect the Zacian, condition. But if Kyogre survives this and picks up the knockout on the Calyrex, that's the win condition.
At this point, too,
nope.
That critical hit from last turn, I think, absolutely massive in making it. So this Kyogre had absolutely no chance of being able to make it past this turn. That is going to be Calyrex picking up that KO. It's going to get itself a nice little special attack boost. And of course, now, yes, the Zacian did go for the Protect, but it is going to be taking some damage here, and considering just how low it was in the first place, it's not going to be able to hold on through that either. And now, very tricky position here, Michael, because, yeah, sure, both people are down to the last 2 Pokemon, but there's a very big difference considering one of Michael's Pokemon still asleep.
It is. I mean, if this Tornadus is able to wake up and set up a Tailwind in time, then it's possible that Michael's Landorus will find a couple of Rock Slide flinches or otherwise find enough damage to make a difference in this endgame. But the Landorus is going to have to stall out at least 1 turn, as we did not see the Tornadus stick around after it was put to sleep like we saw in previous games. So a lot of times Landorus, Therian aren't running Protect. I think that it's just one of those Pokemon where you sort of intend on it Dynamaxing, so you'll put like Swords Dance or something on there to get Max Guard instead. If Michael has Protect, then this is the turn you go for it, but it looks like we're just going to see an attempt at a Tailwind or some sort of Prankster boosted attack, and Astral Barrage, this has to be a knockout.
Yeah.
All right, well, there's the Focus Sash again.
What would have been a KO
yeah.
instead is just going to be this sticking around for 1 more turn. Of course, already having the special attack boost and just being a monster of a Pokemon as it is going to be taking the Landorus out. And sure, you were down to 1 HP. That's not going to be doing anything against the actual Rockfall. So wonderfully played here from Santino in this 3rd game to be cleaning up the series. A fantastic bounce back from that first match.
Yeah, I think just showing how comfortable he is playing in